Hi, I'm David Bonacera, and I'm the owner of Steve's Polishing Pro Systems. Today, I'm going to give you a great education on engineered stone, or what some people call quartz countertops, as you well know. My guest today is Jackie Hoffman. Jackie Hoffman is with BB Industries, and she handles the entire Pacific Northwest. What makes it really interesting is that, of course, yes, she's a woman, but she's working in a man's world, which is tile and stone. And the funny thing is actually because she's the one who is selling the product, she has to do a lot of education, which I find quite interesting of the male-dominated industry, that they have to listen to her and learn from her, which I think is kind of really cool and a nice change, actually. Jackie, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dave.
So a long time ago, back in maybe the late 90s, there was maybe 3 companies that had quartz countertops. But those were really, really durable. They had larger particulates of quartz, and they were just incredibly durable, and restoration guys never had to fix it. Now there's over 40 different companies, and it's just not the same quality, and they change it, and people are really having a hissy fit because they think quartz is indestructible, it's the perfect countertop, and a lot of people are like, why did I do this?
So, I blame a lot of that on marketing. Honestly, the stuff is not indestructible. It can be damaged, and I find it to the point where it's more damaged than natural stone.
Okay, so back then, they had large particulates of what I could call alligator skin, snake skin. And the quartz crystals, here's the polymer, okay? And then the particulates were larger, not as large as this, but they would kind of sit on top, which gave you a texture. Now, they're really almost like a powder, and you're actually not dealing with the quartz on top, but you're really dealing with the polymer itself. So it really isn't as durable as it used to be.
No, you're dealing more with the plastic instead of the quartz.
Okay, but they're changing all the time. And because they changed, they're not even putting it in the SDS sheets.
What SDS sheets, Dave?
Okay, that's right. No, they're not providing that, are they?
No.
Okay, so there's polyesters and acrylics, and God knows what some of the countries are putting into this stuff. Most of the time it was polyester. Now it's acrylics and other stuff that we don't know. Talk a little bit more about that.
So, it's really hard for the fabricators to figure out what's really going on because, again, we don't have MSDS sheets. We don't know what's in this stuff. So we don't know if it's an acrylic blend or if it's a polyester blend. We don't know if it's quartz crystals from granite or if it's the crushed up glass that's in there or even the marble powder that's in there. And so for a fabricator or a restoration person like myself, it's a puzzle when we go into some of these homes and try and figure out how to fix this stuff because we need to know what we're looking at. And a lot of the shops, I've been talking to some of the fabricators about the different smells of the material when they're cutting it. And they're starting to really pay attention to the smell. They're starting to be able to figure out, oh, that stuff smells really nasty or bad when you're cutting it. This stuff smells like, So they're able to differentiate between some of the materials by the smell.
That is fascinating because I never thought about that.
Yeah, that stuff gets hot when you're cutting it.
Yeah, but I never, because people, even Fred Houston's been trying to figure out what's the difference between acrylic and polyesters, but there's no real test out there to really figure it out. And you can say what country it's from, or you can say what manufacturer, that will help you. But yeah, a lot of times you don't know. And kind of like tile, they may get it somewhere, but it's machined or something in Italy, so it's stamped in Italy, but it's not really from Italy. So is that still happening?
Oh, very much so. So there's a lot of private label materials, and a lot of the slab distributors buy it all from the same factory, but they just stamp a different name on it. And then so we have to know kind of where it really comes from, have an idea of what it's really made out of or what that factory is using. But the formulas change so often with the supply and demand of raw materials that it's kind of like a crapshoot trying to figure this stuff out. So it's a puzzle,
Interesting.
and fabricators struggle with trying to figure out how to fabricate it.
So what about durability back in the late 90s to now? Because I find most people want fine grain. They want it to look like Carrera or Calcutta, because sometimes, honestly, that stuff's really expensive these days. And they can get really affordable stuff that looks just like it, but it doesn't have the durability. It doesn't have the texture. It's really fine grain. They're dealing with the polymer, and they're pretty sensitive.
Right, so natural stone is usually cool to the touch, where quartz material is usually room temperature or a little bit warmer to the touch. So a lot of it's the resins, that we're having to deal with. And the resins is what differentiates, the quality of the materials.
Now, we say resins, but then you get into acrylic. Would you call those resins? And then I worked on some stuff with the Steve's Polishing Pro system that they called quartz. It wasn't even close to quartz, but it still fixed the problem.
Right. There's a lot of diversity with Steve's system, which is why it works so well across all of these different manufacturers, whether it's acrylic-based or whether it's a polyester-based product, whether it's a marble powder, a granite dust powder, or whether it's a glass product. It works across all of them.
So the durability really is, for the audience out there, is if you're going to have more texture, chances are it's going to be more durable than the real fine grain.
Correct. The fine grain, I find, it's a little bit more challenging to get that back up to factory finish because there's so much more plastic in it. And
Right.
so basically you're polishing plastic and plastic stains. We know that does some similar polyester.
And then going back to your other answer is you don't know what the heck it is.
Mm-mm.
And if the guys are starting to get the smell, even though they're wearing masks, you can still smell that odor
Yeah.
of what it is. And over 40 different people, I've seen things change and say, well, okay, I've done this particular material. And 2 years later,
It's not the same.
the size of the crystals, the more, the better. The smaller fine grain, you're going to have more problems with. How does this differ from natural stone? You said at the very beginning that natural stone is pretty much more durable nowadays as far as, everybody took out granite and put in marble, or now put in quartz.
Yeah, because I think that, there's low maintenance. Natural stone's a lot easier to fix than quartz, but quartz still has quite a bit of maintenance. It's not stain proof, it's stain resistant. So it can and will still stain, and it will scratch. It is not scratch proof. There's only 2 elements that I'm aware of in the world that you cannot scratch:
Okay.
air and water.
Okay. Good point.
So
Ouch.
everything else you can scratch.
Okay. Now, stone is more heat resistant, and I've come across some inspections I had to do where the countertop cracked, and other than a inside radius, which if you have a 90, a straight 90, in most cases, that's a lot of stress on the inside corner. I thought it was that, but what it was a crock pot that was sitting on a countertop. Kind of like when some of my clients here in Silicon Valley say, I want to be able to cut on my countertop and I want to be able to put a hot pan on it. And I go, did your mother tell you to use a pot holder? Yeah. Did your mother tell you to use a cutting board? Yeah. Mom's still right. But they put a crock pot, and what they don't realize is it's cooking all day, and they end up with this crack, fine hairline crack, which is impossible. It's a lot easier to fix with natural stone
Right.
than it is with quartz. But I guess, that's one of the downfalls to it. It is pretty heat sensitive.
Oh, it is. So I've gone out and had to do some repairs. Curling irons. Somebody set a curling iron down. They can do that on granite, but you can't do that on quartz material. It has a much lower melting point.
Yeah, it's like granite with a hot cup or bowl out of a microwave. You'll get this little metallic ring, which you can polish out, but you're going to have a heck of a problem trying to resolve that on quartz.
Right. And, so people will put candles on their countertops. Light a candle, they're in the glass jar, they think, oh, it's fine. And then, after a while, they realize, when they move that candle because, they've burned through it, or they might finally clean their countertops or something, is that there's a burn mark underneath there. And it's because it's so hot, it just sits there. It can't.
It's a polymer.
It's a polymer.
It's not a rock.
Right. So it's going to burn. It's going to etch. So, and it etches very easily. You cannot take a cookie sheet or a pan from the oven and set it on your countertop. This is not like soapstone.
Yeah. I remember at the beginning they had problems with granite with taking them out of the oven, and people got that learning curve fixed out, which is seal your countertop and find somebody who actually will back it. What about the fabricators and the hazards of this material compared to natural stone?
So, natural stone has silica in it. The granites and the marbles, they have a relatively low amount of silica in them compared to this quartz material. This quartz material is like, 90% by volume silica dust.
Okay.
And so the fabricator is constantly in the silica dust every day. And they're breathing that in. We have masks, which are supposed to, help a bit, but if they don't blow their clothes off, they don't change their clothes before they hop in their vehicle. So now the silica dust is all over inside their car. It's inside their air filters, inside their vehicle. They're breathing this stuff in, whether they turn the heater on or the air conditioner on. Then they're taking it into their homes, and now it's in their carpet, it's in their ventilation system. It's all over the place.
Ooh.
So
yuck.
It is yuck. It is yuck. There's some shops I walk into, and I literally need to put, like part of my sweatshirt or something over just so I can walk into the shop, because there's so much dust everywhere. You just hardly can see anything. You could almost cut it with a knife.
And your membranes consist of your eyes,
yep,
your ears, your nose, and your mouth. And all they're doing is just covering two of them.
Correct.
And being it's not that you're just dealing with a natural stone, a rock, but you're now dealing with man-made chemicals.
Right.
And as we talked yesterday about this, is that sometimes when stuff gets warm or really hot, it outgasses.
Correct.
And that chemical can release vapors, which can be toxic. In concentrate, yes, and a powder, there's no real data on it yet.
No, unfortunately. The quartz material has only been around for the last 25 years?
Maybe, yeah.
Real heavily into the market in the last 25 years or so, and there just really hasn't been enough study on the material. And unfortunately, when it's imported to us from other countries, it's a finished product, and they don't have to provide us with a material safety data sheet. So again, we really don't know what this stuff's made out of. We can only guess, but fabricating it is very toxic.
I've actually done some inspections where people falsified the MSDS sheets, and they actually it was high rises, and they had to tear out all the bathrooms because it didn't meet fire standards. And of course, somebody gave it to me, and I took a torch to it because I like to have fun with testing, and it went on fire, and it didn't extinguish.
Right. Well, it's because the polymers that's in it.
Okay.
I mean, it's a plastic. It's an oil base. It burns. Now, quartz won't burn the quartz itself, but the polymers that's holding it all together.
Right, because stone doesn't burn. You can get burned stains when it's too close.
Right.
Okay, so what about the temperature of storage of this stuff? Because I know that in Arizona, for instance, in Texas, where it's real hot, that the materials aren't like stone that stay flat because they can't take any deflection. Though the quartz can deflect, but if they get really, really hot or you're handling them outside, talk about that.
So, the stuff is not meant to be stored outside at all. I mean, it really has a low tolerance for heat. So, like for instance, up there in Oregon at my place, I was working on a quartz countertop. A fabricator had brought it over to my house, and I had pop-up tent set up. So I was in the shade, and I had it, the sawhorses and stuff about every 3 feet underneath of it. And we were working on it, trying to, resurface this material. And I think it was like maybe 70, 75 outside. It wasn't real bad, but I knew to keep the sun directly off this material because I didn't want it to fade out. So after we were done, we put it on the truck. It took a few of us because it was a pretty big piece. And we could actually see the waves in it where the sawhorses were. And we were only outside for about maybe 5 hours, but we were in shade, under cover, water on it, and just the temperature outside.
So it really is more sensitive. Now, what happens if it's in an area where you have large windows? In Silicon Valley here, in some affluent areas, they have very, very large windows, and the afternoon sun comes in.
Beats down on it. It gets really warm. It can,
Not
yes.
always will, but
no, and a lot of that has to do with the argon gases that are actually in the windows themselves.
Okay.
That will kind of help reduce some of that heat and UV exposure. But if you have windows that might be a little older, or the gas is leaked out of them, and a lot of people don't pay much attention to that, you'll get a much stronger UV ray on your countertops.
Yeah, it can accelerate and magnify through.
Right, exactly. And so that's sitting there baking all day long in that sun. So you can get discoloration. You can get seams, depending on what type of glue they used for their seams, that can pop because there's no way for that glue to expand and contract with the heat. So the countertop has to move, so its weakest point, it's going to pop. And then, we have to deal with the off-gassing.
So this is not like a natural stone. This is tricky because of the different materials, and we don't know what the materials are, so that makes it more challenging. Because I know a lot of guys, when they try to fabricate this stuff, they think it's natural stone.
Right, you can't fabricate it like natural stone. It's its own creature, and as raw materials become a little harder and harder to find, it seems like they're putting a lot more of the polymers or the acrylics in these to hold the powders and the crystals together. And so it really is basically plastic. It's more plastic than anything.
So you had mentioned a little bit earlier about fading. I've seen many times where quartz has been outside, and it was a darker color, of course, but it did fade.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, what do we do? Well, enhance it. Well, the problem is most enhancers aren't really UV stable, and if they don't have enough depth to get into the material, it's not going to last.
No, and most of those enhancers are just a topical.
Yeah, because you guys have really good thin enhancer. I mean, it's cool stuff. Nice and thin, gets in deep, plenty of body in it to last. But still, if you don't have enough area to move into and hold, it's not going to last.
No, and so in some of my fabricators, when they ask me that question, I'll recommend that they warm up the stone, not with, a blowtorch or anything like that, but maybe like a hair dryer, like on low heat, but or even heating blankets and stuff. If they can heat up that polymer just a little bit, then they can put that
There's
sealer.
a fine line between heating up the polymer
and burning it.
And having it bow.
Exactly. So, and then, if you can heat that polymer up just a little bit to where those pores will open up, then when you put that enhancer on there, it'll take.
What a pain, Jackie. Okay. In using this, what about wet areas?
Like showers and bathrooms?
Yeah.
I mean, I've got several
I haven't
shops that
seen
use
it. I really haven't seen any failures. In showers, they've tried to do it on floors, and that's always been a headache. But shower walls, I don't see any problem because it's non-porous. It's not like a white stone where it's going to wick up by capillary action. It's a lot more dense, and you're not going to have as much problems with the moisture.
Well, right. Except at the very, very bottom, where it meets the shower pan.
Right.
And it's getting a lot more water from there.
Those are the lower perimeters, always the heaviest.
Yep, you'll see a lot more of your
areas.
Water mineral buildup. We'll get a lot of calls. People will say, hey, my shower looks like it failed. And what it is, most of the time, it's either the silicone or whatever they use to adhere the quartz material to the substrate.
Can that quartz material sometimes with stone using latex caulking, sometimes siliconized latex, it can bleed into the natural stone?
Yes.
Do you find that happening in the quartz industry?
In the quartz, what I find mostly, or what I get calls about, is the fabricator or the installer used the wrong type of silicone.
Right, not a 100%.
Not a 100%.
I like RTV.
Right, RTV is, your mildew.
That's cool because that's outdoor rated. It's much higher grade. But people are like, oh gee, well, it's expensive. It's like $1.50 more a tube. Get over it.
Right. So, with the RTV 100%, you've got usually they are mold and mildew resistant. Again, resistant, not proof. Resistant.
Right.
It's up to the homeowner to clean their bathrooms correctly.
Yeah, and one of the things about the showers that people do all the time, folks, two real simple things. After you finish using the shower, keep the door open and allow the moisture to escape. And the second thing is, soap is a food source for mold.
Yes.
So if you don't clean your shower walls and you got soap all over it, you're going to have mildew. I see people all the time, they keep the shower door closed. I had this one client, it was funny, because she goes, well, I have a fan. And I go, okay, step in the shower. She steps in the shower. I close the door. I said, okay, so to dry this out, where's your airflow coming from? She goes, I look kind of silly in here, don't I? And I said, you can come out. It's okay. So just keep the door open. My clients that keep the doors open and keep their soap scum under control and have good maintenance really extend the life of any material, whether it's natural stone or quartz.
Right.
And especially because of that flexibility and expansion and contraction that quartz can have over stone. Caulking tends to, over time, shrink and crack and allow water to get into the substrate, whereas a good RTV silicone will do its expansion and contraction and still be more resistant to moisture.
Right, it allows the movement and flexibility.
Which you have to have, yeah.
You're right, exactly. And I suggest to a lot of the homeowners when I go and do restoration in their homes, when I'm doing a bathroom restoration, squeegees. Squeegee not only your shower doors.
Squeegee's just really smart because you're not going to get nearly the hard water deposits.
Right.
Now, Jackie, what do we do when they have hard water deposits on quartz? It's not like a stone where you can take a good scrub and a white pad or hog's hair pad and get it off and everything looks nice.
So when I'm dealing with that, there's a couple of products that I use that does not harm the quartz material, that is pretty easy. And I'm a person that I don't like to use a lot of chemicals. I can't be around a lot of chemicals, and I don't want to use chemicals in somebody's home that can cause an allergic reaction or asthma or rashes or whatever. So I try and find products that are as natural as possible to take away the mineral deposits, the rust, everything else that grows in showers. So and there's some cases where I've just taken a white razor blade and just simply scraped it off as best I can, and then I take a really good cleaner and I clean those shower walls. Or a cleaner
with the razor blade to reduce the friction.
Yeah, to reduce the friction and stuff. So I take as much off as I possibly can before I get into some sort of mechanical use, whether it be the sander or the polisher or whatever. But
that gets really expensive with quartz.
It does. It does. And I've got customers.
So a lot of times just finding good cleaning instructions, or what they say, proper prior planning prevents perplexing problems.
Right.
Is find out how to do the care for it.
Right, and there's so many cleaners on the market today, and just unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand the material that they have in their bathrooms.
Well, they think they have quartz, so it's like, oh, it's indestructible. Nothing will ever happen to it because it's quartz.
Yeah, well, it will acid etch. There's a lot of chemicals in shampoos, body washes, things like that, and eventually, it's going to take the shine off.
Well, it's like there's a lot of what they call green cleaners. And you're giving me that look again. The green cleaners are slightly acidic or they're heavy alkaline. And though they call them green, you pay somebody enough money, they'll give you a stamp. to be a
Right.
green cleaner. Green cleaners back in the 80s was just floor stripper diluted. And they stamped them. It was pretty ridiculous. And now a lot of green cleaners are full of really a lot of surfactants and soap,
Right.
which really adds a buildup. And we already know what soap does with
Right.
mold.
Right. So, I mean, my go-to cleaner, honestly, is Dawn dishwashing soap and water in a spray bottle.
Yeah, I'm not really there on that. I like more of a rinseless cleaner with a little bit of alcohol in it.
Yeah.
Because alcohol won't hurt the quartz.
Correct.
Which goes to my next question. The fabricators did stone for years, and now they're doing quartz. And with a natural stone, you can use acetone to clean all day long. No biggie.
Correct. Not on quartz.
One more time.
Not on quartz.
Thank you. Because the alcohol is fine. Denatured alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, is fine on quartz, but you can't use acetone. And I'm finding so many fabricators go, yeah, I've been doing this for 30 years. Well, they've been getting away with it for 30 years, but they're still using acetone. I just had 3 last month inspections where the fabricators had to buy the kitchen because they actually told the client they used acetone, or the client saw it. One of them said to him, don't use acetone on my quartz countertop because my friend got it damaged. They said, ma'am, we're professionals. We know what we're doing. Guess what? They bought a kitchen. So why are they still doing this, Jackie? Are they not trying to educate themselves? Are they just living on their past and their laurels and think that they know everything? Why aren't they going to the trade shows? Why aren't they, finding out stuff? Why aren't they going to companies like you and say, hey, what should I not do? Or listening to people on the truck. Unfortunately, when doing sales like you do in the Pacific Northwest, you're smarter than most of the people who are doing the selling because you have an extensive background in stone and repairing stuff.
I also have a background in chemistry, so I kind of understand.
That's a plus.
That's a plus, right? So I kind of really understand a lot more about what this material is really made out of. And so the acetone will damage the polymer. It doesn't damage the quartz itself because the quartz, again, is either granite, marble, or glass. But it damages the polymers or the acrylics or, whatever we want to call the stuff that's holding it together these days. And so it burns it. It gives it a chemical burn.
Yeah, you're burning the polymer plus the nano coating.
Yes.
Which, by the way, no one will ever admit that there's a nano coating on their quartz.
Correct. So, when I get the call, hey, how do I fix this? And it's like, well, you really have to kind of grind it down. The grinding is a harsh word to use, but you basically need to remove that burn mark as it is really, and then be able to polish that stone back up again.
So we're getting to the end of this whole thing. Anything else that you'd like to say about this whole quartz thing or repairing or anything that you've seen?
So I see that some of the lower quality quartz products that are coming into our country are a lot harder to repair. And in some cases, they're not worth it to repair.
I've said that before to people. I've said it'll cost you less to replace it than it is to
Right.
fix
And
it.
I always ask my installers or the shop that's calling me and asking me for advice. I'm like, what did you pay for this stuff? Because I'll give you an estimate of how much it's going to cost for me to go in there and fix it.
Yep.
Or I can show you how to do it so, you can alleviate some of these problems. I go, the biggest issue is stop using acetone on quartz material.
Yes. Everybody's making a mistake. I mean,
Yeah.
come on. Google it, for God's sakes.
Yeah, it's really easy. Just, denatured alcohol is not that difficult to find.
No.
You can find it at Walmart, for God's
And
sakes.
sometimes you can use peroxide with a Q-tip to get out stains, too.
You can.
You have to be careful.
You have to be careful. But again, back to knowing your products. And a lot of these fabricators, no offense against them, they're doing a job. But there's no schooling really in the beginning to teach them about all of this.
Okay, so BB Industries is always at the trade shows.
Yes.
They're always trying to educate their people. But is it sometimes you just can't pull a mule?
Well,
they don't want to learn. They don't want to ask.
I think a lot of it is ego. You know, that.
Ouch.
Well,
Wow.
honestly,
Yeah,
it is.
no.
I run into it all the time. And, you know, I'm not trying to show anybody up. I'm just trying to educate them to make their lives a lot simpler and a lot easier, and educate the homeowner on proper care for this material. It's not rocket science until I have to go in and fix it.
Right, and then usually you're the one talking and the contractor's behind you with his hand over his face.
Right.
Anyway, Jackie, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. Is there anything you'd like to bring up to the audience that we haven't got or that you've seen that really needs to be addressed?
Well, I think in our industry we need a better source of education. And I know that there's some classes out there, you know, restoration, repair and stuff, but we really need something for a true fabricator to really understand what they're doing. You know, we've got trade schools for truck drivers, electricians, plumbers, you know, things like that. But we really don't have anything for fabricators. And I think that that's one of the things we're lacking, because in that education process, we can talk about fabricating is one thing, but let's talk about the care, the maintenance, and how to truly fix the stuff when you have an oops. And take some of the embarrassment out of it. Because I think a lot of the problem is fabricators, they get embarrassed when they make a mistake and they don't want to ask for help, or they don't know how to ask for help.
It's kind of like when a man's driving with a woman and he won't ask for directions.
Correct, because she's always right.
Ouch. Anyway, Jackie, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. And folks, you just got one heck of a good education on engineered stone, or what you call quartz countertops, from an expert. Folks, have a great day. Take care.